Newsfirst, face-to-face with Jamal Ratnayaka.
Hello there and welcome to another episode of Face to Face, as always coming to you live and direct from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. Today is the 13th of March 2024 and my guest tonight is a returning guest on the show. He is Niroshan Perera, Member of Parliament representing the main opposition, the Samagi Jana Balawegaya from the Puttalam district. Welcome back, Mr. Perera.
Thank you.
And I hope you're doing well.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Perera, there is much I want to discuss with you tonight, but let's get the ball rolling on a certain meeting that took place earlier this week. The President facilitated a meeting with himself being the chair and several of the officials representing the financial sector in Sri Lanka, including the Central Bank Governor, the Treasury Secretary and the two finance ministers on Monday. And he also invited the opposition parties to discuss the IMF conditions prior to a meeting with the representatives of the IMF. And notably, the Samagi Jana Balawegaya and the opposition leader Sajith Premadasa were not present at that meeting. Only Member of Parliament M.A. Sumandiran was present at the meeting, and he said that he had requested the technical assistance reports from the President and the government to evaluate why certain IMF recommendations have been presented to Sri Lanka in its extended fund facility program. So my first question to you is, being the main opposition in Sri Lanka, why does the Samagi Jana Balawegaya continue to boycott such meetings organized by the President? Do you believe that there would have been a better outcome from this meeting had the Samagi Jana Balawegaya presented its views and raised its concerns during this meeting? And do you believe that as a responsible and accountable opposition, the Samagi Jana Balawegaya should continue to boycott such meetings should they happen in the future as well?
Yes, I think we have to look at the history of what has been happening with the IMF program first.
Right.
So when the government started negotiating with the IMF, as the opposition, we asked for details regarding that program. But the government was reluctant at that time, and they even didn't present some of the details to the Parliament.
Okay.
So, and after that, there was enough debates in Parliament, and even the leader of the opposition, he spoke about the IMF conditions. So I think if the government was very keen, they should have taken notes during these parliamentary debates, and actually gone and back with the IMF and tried to convince the IMF to lessen the burden on the Sri Lankan people. So we believe suddenly the President has come up with this idea to actually for the opposition to meet the IMF. So we believe we have already met the IMF several times. I, as the Foreign Secretary of the SJB, also I was also involved in that. We are going to meet them again next week. So we have clearly stated that this IMF program should be altered. You know, there should be some amendments in the IMF program to lessen the burden on the people, and also for economic growth. We are not seeing economic growth with the current IMF program. So we want some economic growth coming into the country, so people can actually start living again.
Right. So you said that you met the representatives of the IMF before, and you are yet to meet them once more. What sort of discussions were held with the IMF, as you mentioned, regarding the recommendations on how you can alleviate the burden on the Sri Lankan people whilst also maintaining this extended fund facility of the IMF?
I think first thing we have to look at is the collection of taxes, the policy on taxation in Sri Lanka. The government with the Inland Revenue, Customs and even the Excise Department, they have failed to collect their targeted revenue. So the government has gone and raised the VAT, and then that has placed a lot of burden on the poor, and a lot of burden on the businesses in this country. So I think those things should be reviewed again, and we should go for a more targeted tax system, and also the reforms of the SOEs has been delayed. If you take the electricity board, or if you take Sri Lankan Airlines, those have been delayed, and that burden is also coming to the Sri Lankan citizens. So I don't think it's fair for the Sri Lankan citizens to take all this burden and the government not doing any reforms and just taxing the people.
Right. So speaking of SOEs, that's been a topic that has been trending for quite some time. We saw 52 SOEs, strategic SOEs are to be restructured, including Sri Lankan Airlines. And last week or earlier this week, we saw Minister Nimal Siripala de Silva saying that either the national carrier has to be privatized or there will be job cuts and insecurity, so on. But under the SJB's leadership, should the SJB rise to power and take the helm of the country, what sort of a plan does the SJB have for these SOEs, especially the ones that are underperforming and are loss-making?
Yes, so I think the SOEs needs to be restructured. That's no question about it.
Right.
It's the way that the government is doing the restructuring that's the problem. So it has to be transparent.
Right.
And actually, we believe that if you are looking for investors, the investors has to be technically sound for them to run these SOEs.
Right.
And of course, there's like if you take the Sri Lankan airline, there's a question about regarding the debt. They have a US dollar 1.2 billion debt. So some of that debt has been
We saw
taken,
500 billion will be absorbed by the government.
By the government means by the people.
Yes, taxpayers.
Taxpayers and ordinary
Citizens.
The farmers, the fishermen and all that, they'll have to pay. And they haven't even seen aircraft,
Yes, true.
so it's not fair that they have been asked to pay. For the decision taken by the former Rajapaksas. We know that Rajapaksas were running that airline. The infamous Airbus deal has cost this country so much of money. So ultimately the people have been asked to pay for that.
Right.
I don't think that's fair. So if the government is taking some of the debt, there should be at least an investigation into what happened at the Sri Lankan Airlines, who made the decisions to really run that aircraft, the carrier to the ground. So that's the position we are in. And if you take the electricity board also, now there was a lot of debate regarding the price of electricity.
Yes.
At one time it was the highest in South Asia. So there's a lot of SJB went to courts and there was a lot of attention, and finally the CEB and the government decided to reduce the price. But still I think people are finding it difficult.
And there is room for further reductions, you believe?
Yes, yes.
Right.
And efficiency inside these SOEs.
Right. So under an SJB government, just to clarify, will there be a total privatization of these SOEs, or will you opt for a private-public partnership, or will you seek to make the public sector more efficient while holding on to full autonomy of the, or holding on full responsibility of these SOEs? How will it go about?
So I don't think there can be one solution. So you have to look at each SOE separately, individually, right, and see how much contribution that SOE is giving to the people and the economy.
Right.
And you know, these SOEs, they are run differently. You know, so you have to look at that also and see how we can do the restructuring process. So the restructuring has to be done. So that's
non-negotiable.
Yeah, there's no debate on that. But the way these SOEs are going to be restructured, we'll have to
differ.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Yeah.
Right. So moving from that to the election drama and the political sphere in Sri Lanka, there are many parties saying that it will be a presidential election that will be held first, or a general election. The SLPP says one thing, the president says another thing, Minister Harin Fernando is saying another thing, and this is making it increasingly difficult for political parties to structure their campaign plans, to rally their troops, to rally their candidates and their voters. What is your opinion on this ambiguity surrounding which election will be held? Because according to the constitution, the presidential election is to be held. But while be that as it may, there have been rumors circulating that a general election will be held beforehand and so on. So what is your theory, what is your opinion on that matter?
So I think the government is trying to confuse the voters and the opposition parties.
I see.
By stating from different quarters what they are going to do.
Right.
So it depends on how the government is doing. We know that the government is far behind the opposition parties in terms of numbers at the ground. So I think the president and the government members are worried that they won't be able to hold on to power any times in the long term.
Future, yes.
In the long term. So I think they are looking at different scenarios.
Right.
So one scenario is for the president to go for a general election first, and then, as you know, that he has allocated funding only for one national election this year. So what he can say is we have the general
only
election,
allocations for one national election.
so only general election this year.
Right.
Then we'll have to postpone the presidential election because we don't have funding.
Right.
So that's one scenario. The other scenario is he's trying to abolish the presidency. So he might say that they might have to have a referendum and then maybe have a court case. So there are different scenarios that he can use. So I think for him the preference is to postpone the presidential and be at the helm for some time. So I don't know which option that he might use, but I think he doesn't have the numbers to go for a presidential and win unless he gets members from the opposition into his camp.
Right. So speaking about getting members of the opposition into a certain person's camp, we know when election season rolls over, there are a lot of crossovers that happen. Even the SJB has witnessed several of the members or representatives from other political parties joining forces with the SJB, pledging their alliance to the SJB. And I was watching the news earlier today, and Minister Harin Fernando was saying that the SJB is the UNP and that they will join forces eventually. So what do you make of this statement? Is there an underlying force or a discussion taking place between rejoining the UNP? Because essentially the representatives of the SJB used to be part of the UNP, as we all know. So are there discussions being held to form that sort of an alliance, Mr. Perera?
Yeah, I think Minister Harin Fernando has been predicting this for
quite some time.
For a number of years, I think.
See.
Yes.
Okay.
But it hasn't happened. We were part of the UNP, but I think now the policies are different. So I think if there's a ultimate solution, that solution should be that the SJB should take over the UNP.
I see.
And reform, not the other way around. But we believe that the government plan is to divide the SJB. If you look at the Kuliapitiya president's address, he was trying to divide the SJB using Harsha's some of his statements. So he's not only trying to divide the SJB, he's trying to divide the Pohottuwa, and even the NPP. He's trying to divide with. He might try to take Harini out from NPP. He will try to divide the TNA. So by dividing all these parties, he thinks that he can create a coalition.
So you believe he is carrying out the practice of divide and conquer? Divide
and conquer is the only option left for the president,
I see.
The way things are going. Because if he tries to go alone with the Pohottuwa, I think he'll end up losing very badly.
Talking about the Pohottuwa, when Basil Rajapaksa arrived in the country, we saw Udayanga Veeratunga saying that he is here to restructure the Pohottuwa and to organize the political campaign of the SLPP. And the SLPP, as we know, regardless of what people might say regarding their mandate, the SLPP they have racked up landslide victories at whatever election they have faced. So I don't believe one can discount the support that the SLPP still has, regardless of what transpired over the past 2-3 years. So how big of a threat do you think the SLPP might be when it comes to any election?
Yeah, so I think after the Aragalaya, the SLPP voter base has collapsed.
Right.
Yeah, so they are holding on to some part of the voter base they had before the Aragalaya. So with the Aragalaya, as you know, the security of the members of parliament was the main reason that the MPs voted in favor of the current president. So I think that scenario will go forward because from what I know, the SLPP members of parliament, they are very concerned regarding their security after a national election.
Right.
So that will be one area that they will focus on. The other one is using the general election, how they can come back to parliament. That'll be the other scenario that they will take into account. And of course, after that, it'll be the country, you know.
Right.
So first they will
their own interest is going to be looked at.
Yeah, will play because they won't say it publicly. But that will be one area that we'll have to really focus because the MPs taking decisions which alliance to support will depend on their security and their ability to come back into parliament.
All right. So coming back to the economy of the country, we saw how the economic crisis took a very big toll on the SMEs, small and medium scale enterprises in Sri Lanka, and the opposition leader has been very vocal about protecting SMEs, especially when it comes to the Parata execution and laws regarding such matters. So what sort of plan does the SJB have or plan to execute should it come to power in order to first protect SMEs in Sri Lanka, give them the necessary funding required and also uplift their levels and the standards of their operations in the country for them to contribute to Sri Lanka's economy thereon?
Yes, so one area that we are going to focus is on income generation.
Right.
So it's very important that we protect the industries and the businesses we have right now.
Yes.
So if you look at the challenges, the high cost of electricity, high cost of labor, then the efficiency of the government and rules and regulations. So all these things have to be taken into account. So the SJB has started work on those areas. We have come up with certain policies.
Could you elaborate on some of them?
Yeah, so in introducing digital technology to run the government is one area that we are going to really focus on. Because that we believe we can really leverage and make the economy more efficient. That will give a boost to the small and medium scale enterprises.
Right.
And of course, restructuring the SOEs, especially the CEB, will actually give some much needed support for the industrial sector because it has been going down during the past couple of months. So those areas, I think the SJB is working on a very practical program. You know, some political parties, they have their slogans of how they are going to reform the economy. But that's not the case with the SJB. We are actually focusing really on implementing what we are going to do.
Right. So eventually, Mr. Perera, the fact of the matter is you need the confidence and the votes of the people to execute whatever plans you have for the country in whatever industry you may consider. And being a young voter myself, I know that there are many out there who are still deciding who to vote for, because especially after the Aragalaya, it seems like the people have finally opened their eyes to move away from traditional politics, from traditional loyalties to certain political parties, to being pragmatic, to taking a more concerted effort when voting in their representatives. So what sort of a plan does the SJB have in that sense to convince voters that the SJB is going to be their first choice and the SJB is the best party or the option to take Sri Lanka forward?
So in terms of the method of solving problems, I think the idea is one thing and implementation is another thing. To implement, you need a good team.
Yes.
So I think SJB has the best team to implement. We have a mix of professionals and people who are very sound at the ground level to carry out this program. So I think the team and the leadership of the SJB will be key in terms of carrying out a very practical program.
Right.
And it should be a people-centric program, because we have seen the current government, they are not really concerned about the people. They are just concerned about the numbers. The numbers might look good, and the IMF might say this is a good program, but the people are suffering. So the people are angry, and people want a change. That's what we are looking at, seeing at the ground. So SJB knows that there's a problem, so we want to be the solution. So we hope that the government, the people will understand what we are trying to say. Especially we are trying to modify the IMF program where it will be a less burden on the people and have a growth part in the program. So we have to have economic growth because without economic growth we can't bring our country out of this debt trap.
Right. So you mentioned earlier during the program that you overlook foreign affairs for the SJB, and we know over the past few years, especially because of the economic crisis, there have been superpowers who have supported Sri Lanka, including India, China, and so on. And now this Indian Ocean region and the Sea of Sri Lanka has gained a lot of importance. It's no longer a backwater part of the world. What sort of plan will the SJB execute in maintaining cordial relations with all of these developed nations? Because we know that maintaining cordial relations with each and every country is vital. Being a champion of the non-aligned movement, Sri Lanka also has a reputation to protect. So where will the SJB stand when it comes to foreign policy, dealing with certain assertions made by certain developed countries in their need to secure power in the world power struggle? Where does the SJB stand?
Yeah, so our foreign policy will be non-aligned. So we'll have to have good relations with all the countries, but we have to do a balancing act. We know there's a power struggle in the Indian Ocean. There's a rising power, China. So we have to deal with that. And of course there's the USA, then the India, and of course the Japan and all the other
European countries and so on.
So we have been dealing with all those countries, and we have been trying to build up our relationship. So I think in terms of even the economic recovery, it's very important that we deal with these countries in a straightforward manner. So we have been trying to get the IMF program into the right track, using the relationship between these three countries. So I think in terms of the foreign policy, it should be Sri Lankan, what Sri Lanka can benefit from the foreign policy in terms of what we
our interests have to be protected first.
In terms of investments coming into Sri Lanka, and of course the security of Sri Lanka is very important when we are dealing with the world powers. So we feel that sometimes the current government has been trying to be in favor of all the countries. That's not going to work. So they have been trying to
appease multiple key players.
They are trying to. They don't have a direct policy of how to deal.
So it's very wavered.
Wavered. So that has been the problem, I think, with the foreign policy, and that has created some issues with multiple countries. So we had to really deal with that and come up with a strong foreign policy that can deal with these problems.
So finally, although we're pressed for time, I must ask you this question. We know fraud and corruption is something that's nowadays thrown around very easily, saying that led to Sri Lanka's downfall. But nothing is really being done to address fraud and corruption in the country, although we know that the economy is performing slightly better and we are in an IMF program. There was a governance diagnostic tool that identified corruption vulnerabilities, but again, there seems to be very scant regard paid to addressing fraud and corruption in the country, to meet it out from the system. So what is the SJB's plan to address fraud and corruption, to create a corruption-free Sri Lanka for all of us?
So the current government, they are depending on people who are associated with corruption for their survival. So I think a fresh mandate, we believe, will give the strength for the SJB leadership to really go after certain issues with corruption. So the Anti-Corruption Act needs to be implemented. It can't be just the law. So there should be a strong leadership to go after this corrupt parties and the practices which has been prevalent in Sri Lanka for a long time. So it will take some courage, political courage, and we believe that the Sri Lankan people, they also want this change. The anti-corruption drive should be one of the main themes that a new government should implement.
All right. So very quickly, let me just touch on the matter of education. We know that through the Sakvala program, the opposition has been supporting a lot of rural schools. The opposition leader has also been very active when it comes to supporting the education, primary, secondary and tertiary. What is the Samagi Janabalavage's blueprint for upgrading education, to making sure that the trending topics and the trending syllabi of the world is adopted by Sri Lanka, and our children get the best possible education and the quality of education is upgraded?
So as you know, the world is changing very fast. The technology and the knowledge is changing fast. So we have to meet those challenges, you know. We believe that Sri Lanka has been stuck in the past. We can't be stuck in the past and face challenges in the future. So we need to change the education system to suit the future.
That's right.
Our young generation needs to compete with the world. We can't be an isolated island anymore. So competition is the key for us to win the economic or any other challenges that we are going to face as a nation. So we believe that investing in education is very important. So that's why the leader of the opposition has started, even when he's in the opposition, he has started investing in education. You know, some people have been criticizing, saying that we are trying to get votes, but he has gone beyond just an election campaign, and he wants to make a difference in education.
Right. So my guest tonight on Face to Face was Member of Parliament Niroshan Perera, representing the main opposition of Sri Lanka, Samagi Janabalavage, a returning guest on our show. We discussed many things, from the economy to what election will be held and the SJB's plans on foreign policy, uplifting SMEs and also Sri Lanka's education sector. Thank you very much, Mr. Perera, for joining me this evening.
Thank you very much.
And that's the way it was on Face to Face. Do join us tomorrow, same time, same place. And for the Newsfirst team, I'm Jama Ratnayaka. Take care and good night.